It has come to this, the threat of death at the beginning of life. A disease once confined to adults has spread to ages younger and younger, until today it attacks the youngest of all, only a few minutes old, a child just born. He was born addicted to cocaine. He cries, his hands tremble, his future, like ours, unknown. No one knows how much damage the drug has done, how much talent, creativity, productivity have been forever lost because of a mind-altering drug. In a way, he's a symbol of our nation, our future. When this child is hurt, America hurts as well. According to national opinion polls, in the minds of most Americans today, there is no greater crisis facing us than the epidemic of drug abuse. It seems that fear is justified. In size, the epidemic is unprecedented in our history. It is more pervasive in this nation than any other country on earth. It now threatens the health of 2 generations of Americans. It is, by any measure, healthcare, productivity, crime, violence, costing us tens of billions of dollars each year. It is a kind of war, a global war and a civil war. And though we've won some battles recently, in the last few years, for example, drug use has declined among our young by a few percentage points, one overpowering fact remains. In the 1980s, more Americans are using more drugs than ever before. The epidemic, of course, is well documented. What has not been explained very well is just how much damage is being done. And that damage comes in ways that most of us haven't even thought about before. To the individual, of course, the pain is enormous, especially for the young, who are the most vulnerable to the depression and loneliness that, in the end, always accompany the use of drugs. And that pain is contagious. There aren't many things more destructive to a family than someone on drugs.
Hate and rage just start to boil within the family.
Watch out! Oh, he's coming in!
3! And those collection of families called communities, neighborhoods, especially those poor and vulnerable, are being torn apart by drug money and drug abuse. Finally, there is violence and corruption around the world, especially in those nations south of our border. A campaign of terror and crime paid for by those millions of casual users in America who think they're hurting no one, not even themselves. And if this weren't enough, today there are new drugs. First, a kind of instant cocaine called crack, and then designer drugs, a cheap, often deadly mix of chemicals made in a basement by a high school or a college chemist. And finally, new information about an old drug, pot, marijuana, the most commonly used illicit drug in America, and clearly the most misunderstood.
Sit all the way back.
This is what most of us imagine: death, near death, a drug overdose on the streets of a big city. A young woman in danger of losing her life as her 9-year-old daughter looks on.
Elizabeth, stay awake. If you're okay, you'll be awake.
How old are you, Mommy?
The ambulance crew administers dextrose to raise her blood sugar level, gives her oxygen, checks her heart, her breathing, all vital signs. She will spend the night in a South Bronx hospital. The 9-year-old will have to wait till morning to learn that her mother will live. It's the image of drugs most of us have. Night, the poor section of a city, someone young with dark hair and dark eyes, barely conscious, barely alive. But there is another image just as common. This time, there is no ambulance, no faraway look in her eyes. You don't see the damage. You have to listen for it.
I'm angry, I'm hurt, and I'm scared, and I'm lonely. I need help. And I just think, I swear if this disease was a person, I swear I'd kill it. I'd like to rip it apart, you know.
The disease is addiction, and instead it has ripped her life apart. Jamie is 17 years old, from West Palm Beach, Florida. She had her first drink when she was 8. When she was 10, she smoked pot. When she was 12, she used them all: cocaine, speed, Valium, PCP, LSD, whatever she could find. She liked to party, that was her word, and for 8 years it was quite a party. 5 times she was committed to a psychiatric hospital. She was arrested twice. She wrecked 2 cars. She was beaten up and raped, had an abortion, cut herself with a knife, burned herself with cigarettes.
And I drank a bottle of sea breeze. Yeah, so
Sea
you
breeze?
put it on your face. And,
Cleanser?
yeah. And I drank a bottle of that, and I just wanted to die. And
You wanted to die?
because I felt like everything sucked and I was going to be in this hospital forever and nothing was changing. And I really just wanted to die for a little while, you know, until things got better.
Jamie has been in treatment at the Ridgeview Institute in Atlanta for 10 months. That's the longest she's gone without a drink or a drug since she was 10 years old. It seems maybe this time, finally, she has turned her life around. But how? Or why? What happened? What finally convinced her to accept help and give up drugs? She says it's because her life finally hit rock bottom. And I asked her what she meant.
Having just had an abortion, not even knowing I had BD.
The date was January 1986. Jamie had just turned 16 years old.
Not caring except for getting high. Yeah. Going into that clinic and having an abortion and getting off on the dope.
The anesthetic?
Yeah. That's all I wanted was more dope. I was willing to get pregnant again to have more dope. More of that stuff. I wanted more. It was good. I wanted it. I liked it. It made me feel good. I came out of the abortion clinic smiling. You know? That's the bottom.
She could be Jamie's twin. Hillary is also 17 years old, in a recovery program, this one in New York. Off drugs for almost a year. She started on pot when she was 11 years old. She was an addict by the age of 13. And like Jamie, like almost every drug user I've met, drug use started out as fun and inevitably led to either suicide or a suicide attempt.
I was stealing, selling things, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And I got really hopeless, and I felt like I don't want this anymore. And I hated myself, and nothing I ever did made me feel any better. No matter how high I got on whatever I got, it didn't help. So finally I decided I just don't care. You know, I want to die. And I had even tried to kill myself when I was 11. And in the hospitals I had tried.
What did you do when you were 11?
When I was 11, I took a lot of Valium. Tried to overdose on that.
The leading cause of death among 15 to 24-year-olds is car accidents. Many of those are drug and alcohol related. Second, homicide. Again, drinking and drugs are often involved. And third on the list is suicide. 5,000 will die this year. An estimated 600,000 will try.
The number one associated cause, underlying cause for suicide for young people below 30, including teenagers, is alcohol and drugs.
But it's not always that they wish to die. Sometimes kids on drugs just don't want to live. It's another kind of suicide that 15-year-old Alan Rockwell knows about. The kind where luck decides if and when and how you'll die. Drink too much and drive too fast. One night you won't make it home. Swallow a whole bottle of pills. Maybe your mom will get you to the hospital in time. Maybe she won't.
I wasn't the type to take a gun to my head or slit my wrist. I just got a real careless attitude. I would do crazy things. I would get totally drunk and drive a car 80 miles per hour around a sharp curve. I was doing a lot of codeine at one time in my life there, and I was riding a skateboard, and I ran into a car, and I busted up my arm and my side and my ribs and everything.
Why did you do that? You didn't see the car, or you did it on purpose?
I didn't care. You know, it was just at a point in my life where it wasn't a blunt in trying to commit suicide, but it was like I didn't care if I died or lived. You know? It was wanting to die, but scared to die, you know? And so I just didn't care. I did crazy things.
So you saw the car coming?
Yeah.
And you didn't get out of the way?
No, I didn't care.
Say, hey! He's used almost every drug imaginable before he quit a year ago at the age of 14. Over the years, he's stolen from his friends and parents. He's robbed convenience stores, liquor stores. He fought with his parents, punched his dad, threw books at a teacher. He was in and out of schools, hospitals, drug treatment programs, in and out of jail. Alan almost destroyed himself, and if you listen to the different stories his mom and dad tell, it's clear he almost destroyed them as well.
You start to hate one another. You stop sharing feelings. You stop caring. Hate and rage just start to boil within the family.
Doris and I were fighting each other tooth and nail.
You too.
Hell yeah.
It almost caused, I would say, a divorce in our family because every night was a battleground.
This is the other side of drug abuse, the damage done to others. It's hard to condense all that's happened to the Rockwell family in the last 5 years. The fights, the 1,000 sleepless nights, the endless meetings, trips to schools, hospitals, calls to the police. But maybe all we need to know is this. In September of 1985, they went to court and turned over custody of their child to the state. Alan was 14 years old.
It was probably about the most heartbreaking thing that I've done in my life. But we had to save Alan's life. And there's no feeling in the world like watching your son being cuffed and taken away with a detective on each arm and taken to jail. It's hard. God, it's hard.
It's like literally something is missing from your life. And then a week later when you go to the Youth Development Center to visit and you see what it's like, it's
The jail.
concrete, it's jail. It's concrete walls, bars, little bitty rooms with little bitty glass windows in them about this big. It smells. It's heartbreaking, totally heartbreaking.
And for a family, that heartbreak can last for years because the disease of addiction is so persistent. For example, this is Jamie 10 weeks after our interview with her, drinking again, taking drugs, getting high every day. A few days after our interview, she disappeared, ran away from her halfway house, her drug treatment program, got a job at a liquor store, met 2 guys, and moved in with them. Just by accident one day, we happened to see her on the street. She has almost no money, no car, no furniture, no clothes, no family. They don't want her back.
I don't see any future, so it's just doing whatever I'm doing today.
Just today.
Just getting high today. Just see if I can get high today. That's all I'm worried about, if I can get a bag today. I mean, I've been on the phone all morning, setting stuff up for today, tomorrow, and Saturday.
Trying to get some drugs?
Yeah, getting some acid, getting some, pot and stuff.
17 years old, 9 times in treatment, 9 times she's gone back to drugs. Her future? Well, let's move on. 14th Street, Washington, D.C. One copier said, "We treat it like it's radioactive, and 10-year-old kids are smoking it on the street." The director of a local drug program said, "There is a monster in this community, and it's become our kids." The kids live in Washington, Baltimore, Chicago, Los Angeles, and the drug they use is phencyclidine, PCP, in some ways our most dangerous drug.
Calm down.
The drug makes your body numb, your mind insane. Under the influence of PCP, this man thought he could fly. This man decapitated his 14-month-old son, and this man threw his 3-month-old nephew against the ceiling, crushing the child's skull, and said, "I've just killed the Son of God. It's a powerful drug." The police say ordinary people become almost supermen after smoking marijuana sprinkled with PCP.
My leg!
PCP is unpredictable. The effects depend upon who's smoking it and when, what they're feeling at the time, and how much they smoke. But whatever the effect, in this city, PCP is an epidemic. And everywhere we went, shooting out of a car with dark windows, we saw the commerce of PCP. The dealer slips a tinfoil packet to the buyer. Inside, marijuana sprinkled with liquid PCP, enough to roll 3 cigarettes. The buyer smells it to check for the strong chemical aroma of the drug, and then if he likes it, he hands the dealer $10 and walks away. There's also curbside service for suburban customers who drive in from Maryland or Virginia, and the deals happen 1,000 times a day. But there is an even more serious problem here: corruption. Each day in this country, millions of dollars exchange hands in the sale of drugs. And each day the poorest among us, the most vulnerable, learn that at least the quickest way to succeed in life is to sell drugs.
If all I want to do is feel good tomorrow, you know, if all I want to do is have a nice car, you know, if all I want to do is have the latest designer clothes and walk around with them, then drugs work. And nothing else works as well in our community. Nothing else works as well. You know, it is the job. You know, even if you want a job, if you have enough foresight to say, well, I need a job, you know, then the job that's available to you is the selling of drugs.
And on every street corner, there's a young man who watches the drug dealer, sees the new Mercedes, the money, the fancy clothes. What goes through his mind? Stay in school, work hard, get a good job? Why bother if you can make more money working fewer hours selling drugs on the street? That's what Robert did at the age of 16. He sold PCP. How much money would you make on a typical day?
I make close to $200 a day. You know,
$200.
Just one package. If you do a package a day, right? But you can make up to $200 a day. That's all I try.
How long would it take you to make $200?
Say about from 2 hours. If I got home at 6, by 8 o'clock I was finished.
Drug abuse is a contagious disease. In concentric circles, as we've seen, it infects first the user, then his family, then the community, and before long, the nation. How many kids today are doing poorly in school, or flunking out, or dropping out because of drugs? And what's to become of them? How many are in prison today for murder and rape and armed robbery because they were high at the time, or drunk, or needed drugs? Some experts estimate as many as 50%. And how many workers in American factories and offices are drinking and using drugs, causing accidents, absenteeism, a decline in productivity, and a rise in healthcare costs, all of which cost this nation tens of billions of dollars each year? And what about other nations, Mexico, Peru, Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, Brazil, where efforts to destroy drugs in the field have routinely failed, where more money than ever before in history is pouring into the hands of a single group of people, drug smugglers, who have become the wealthiest, most powerful, most violent people in those nations?
When tremendous amounts of money can come into a small element in the society who are involved in drug trafficking, drug production.
Criminals.
It is no time at all before they can become the dominant power in the country. They can become the ruling powers.
The rich farmland outside of Bogota, Colombia, where $6 billion worth of cocaine is grown every year, at least half of it destined for America. With that much money and an average per capita income of $600 a year, corruption is inevitable. All over South America and Latin America, from the cop on the street to the heads of government and all the judges and army officers in between, there is bribery, intimidation, corruption. Billions of dollars are involved here, some of it used to finance leftist guerrillas, and most of that money comes from the United States. And then in November 1985, there was an event that would have made headlines around the world had it happened in the United States. M-19 guerrillas took over the Palace of Justice in the capital city of Bogota. It is now believed that the leftists were paid with drug money and sent into the building to destroy government files concerning drug smugglers. The government eventually took back the building after a tank rammed through the front door. But over 100 people died in the siege, many of them hostages, among them 11 justices who sat on the Colombian Supreme Court. And then there are the stories we never hear. One told to me by Jean-Michel Cousteau, the son of Jacques Cousteau, who spent months in the Amazon filming a documentary about the growing and smuggling of cocaine.
When you have proof that a child had been kidnapped, had been killed, had been gutted, had been stuffed with cocaine and shipped away, so to go by unnoticed, and that very cocaine is what is consumed on the market, whether it's in the United States or any other place. I think those people who are consumers need to know those things, because I believe in man, and I believe that once they know those things, that will be the right incentive to stop.
Wait a minute, what? You kill a child?
There's 3 cases which are known and documented of children who had disappeared or were kidnapped, were killed, gutted, and filled with cocaine.
Their dead bodies filled with cocaine as a method of shipment?
Exactly.
And in South America and here at home, every day, some peace officer takes a bribe while another is injured or killed. And kids grow up believing the way to succeed is to sell drugs, and so drugs are sold. And families are torn apart, and 10-year-old kids become addicts. All of this, or too much of it, because of us.
The drug trafficking networks would not exist if there were not the tremendous consumer demand here.
United States.
It's not just addicts who create that demand. The largest amount of money comes from the casual consumer. So that casual use, that good time party, that it's my drug of choice, I can do it, I'm not an addict, etc., is in many ways the most morally irresponsible kind of usage.
It's also far more dangerous than most casual users believe. 39th Street and 10th Avenue, New York. There's a crime in progress right in front of our eyes. A drug deal that happens in an instant. To see it, you have to zoom in and slow down. The man on the left has money in his left hand. He hands some of it to the man next to him, and in return, the buyer receives a vial of drugs. It's all over in a moment. The drug is crack, refined cocaine, a little white rock that comes in a plastic vial. The newest, latest drug in our search to get high. It's cheap, about $10. You put it into a small pipe and smoke it. The high is instantaneous and highly addictive.
I think the effects of crack are so powerful because the drug gets into the brain in such concentrated amounts in such a short period of time that there's no such thing as occasional or recreational crack smoking. Everybody has to consider themselves at significant risk when it comes to crack.
At the age of 15, he was at risk and didn't know it. Pierre is now 17, living in a 24-hour-a-day treatment program in Queens, New York, trying to put his life back together after 2 years of using first cocaine and then crack.
The way people talk about crack on the street as if it was God, it's kind of weird. You go on the street, crack is on everybody's mind. And do anything for crack. Like I said, do anything for crack. A person's life doesn't mean nothing. They'll kill you for crack.
And that's why Pierre is here, in treatment. Crack became more important than family, friends, school, the law, the most important thing in his life. And he was afraid that if he didn't get help,
I'd be dead soon. Without a doubt, I'd be dead. Or I'd be in jail.
800 cocaine, can I help you? Okay, and how old is your son? Okay, he's 18.
this is the 800 cocaine hotline room at Fair Oaks Hospital in New Jersey. 1,200 times a day the phone rings here, and half of those calls are about crack. No other drug has spread so fast.
Cocaine is being packaged to appeal to young people, priced to sell to young people, delivered to young people in a form that causes addiction at a rapid rate. The price is there to meet the adolescent user, so that the epidemic in adolescence, I think, is just starting.
And there's another epidemic already underway that begins here. Someone's basement or garage, a home laboratory to make designer drugs, mutant drugs, that are identical to heroin or morphine or some other illegal drug, except one molecule has been changed, or one group of molecules, which makes the drug dangerous but legal. 26-year-old Toby Javia was one of 500 young people from California who took one of these designer drugs, but it was a bad batch. The drug was toxic, and this is the result. A disease that is identical to Parkinson's. There is no cure. With medicine, he constantly shakes and can barely move. Without that medicine, he is forever paralyzed.
In a way, it's almost worse than paralysis, some of these people say. It's like being straitjacketed inside your own body, locked inside.
And how is the mind?
Mind is normal. The mind is normal. Some people would call it a fate worse than death. The only time the mind isn't normal is when we're giving such large doses of medicine, just so they can move for 2 to 3 hours, that we make them sick with the medicine. Then, yes, they can move, but they're hallucinating. They're in terror. We have one young woman that screams all the time.
Dr. Langston was the chief of neurology at Santa Clara Valley Hospital in San Jose when he discovered the Parkinson's-like disease in drug addicts.
Hi, George.
And this was his first patient, George Carrillo. He thought he was taking heroin one night, July 1982, but it was a toxic look-alike, a designer drug. And when he woke up the next morning, he was frozen. Every 6 hours, George is given a medication which enables him to move a little, but the side effects are fire and snakes.
And it sounds like it's pretty frightening. Do you have any time during the day that you're free of those?
No.
Can you describe them to me?
Snakes and fire.
Snakes and fire.
And his condition is permanent. In fact, most designer drugs are relatively simple, easy to make, and a few $100s worth of chemicals can make $1 million worth of street drugs. So think of the future. There are tens of thousands of young people in this country who buy some drug that comes in a little plastic bag. Some kids just once or twice, others every day. The dealer says it's cocaine, or crack, or PCP, or speed, or he makes up a name. China White, Love Boat, Ecstasy. But there's no way to know what it really is, or what's in it, or what effect it'll have.
The question we're asking is, well, what about in 2 years? What about in 15 years? What about in 30 years? Nobody knows that.
So you might see an outbreak of tremendous numbers of senile people.
See, that's exactly the kind of thing we're worried about. Parkinson's, people start having difficulty with memory, their thinking, their ability to function. Maybe it's going to be personality. Maybe in 15 years these people are going to start having depressions or mania or schizophrenic-like illnesses because those transmitters, the way nerve cells talk to each other, were damaged a long time ago. You add the effects of aging on top of that, who knows what we're doing to the human brain?
A little bit frightening.
It's very frightening.
Tens of thousands may use crack. Hundreds of thousands may take designer drugs. But millions in this country smoke pot. And the drug is 5 to 10 times as potent today as it was a decade ago. In the last 15 years, studies have suggested that marijuana damages the lungs, interferes with sexual reproduction in both males and females, and suppresses the body's immune system, decreasing our ability to fight sickness and disease. But as always, the most frightening damage occurs in the brain. One study was done by Dr. Robert Gilkison at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland. Another was done by Dr. John Hanley, a professor of neurology at the UCLA Med School. And both men discovered the same thing. Smoking marijuana, even occasionally, reduces the ability of your brain to think, to remember. For example, these are the electroencephalograms of 2 young adults. The top EEG, a marijuana smoker. The bottom line, someone who doesn't smoke, and the difference is obvious. First off, the brain of the pot smoker has more slow waves, which you usually see in the brain of a young child, or someone sleeping, or someone mentally retarded.
People with waves who are slower than they should be are generally developmentally behind other people. Their brain hasn't matured in terms of brain waves the same way. So in a way, if you didn't have slow waves there before, and you kicked your EEG back, it's like retarding your brain.
And what may be more important, the top line, the pot smoker, has about half as much electrical energy, brain energy, as the non-smoker.
We see a progressive loss of energy, which means that there's a progressive loss of the number of circuits that are being fired in your head.
And what does that mean?
Decrease in the number of circuits, you have a decrease in the number of images, you have a decrease in the number of images, you have a decrease in the number of thoughts. Marijuana makes you dumber. It's that simple. We're making some of our brightest kids average.
Average.
The brightest kid is getting average, the average kid is getting dumb.
Come on, Michael.
I feel like I ain't never gonna get no smarter. I feel that way. I ain't never getting smarter, man. I'm having all, I can't even do fractions. I can't even do fractions, man. I got to produce somebody half my...
At the Aurora treatment program in New York, Mike Hughes is having a tough time. He started smoking pot when he was 12 years old, and today, 5 years later, he struggles with that past. For 17 months, he hasn't had a drink or taken a drug, and yet the drugs still haunt him because he reads at a 6th grade level, and he can't do grade school math.
Well, I'm still, like, in program right now having a hard time with just understanding figures and numbers and stuff like that. You know, things that I should have learned like a long time ago, you know what I mean, in school. You know, fractions and multiplying, decimals, you know, 3rd grade, 4th grade work.
Shot at night with a laser camera, 2 young men smoking pot. And they might say, sure, I smoke pot, but I go to school every day or go to work every day. What's all this about brain damage? I'm doing just fine. But the question is, compared to what? What's your potential? Not what you're doing now, but what you could be doing if you have the use of the full power of your brain.
Marijuana interferes with the intellectual potential, the emotional potentials of every individual who uses it. And to have people misled or misconceived about this stuff being harmful and achieving 10 or 15 or 20% less than they could have expected of themselves for their futures is frightening to me.
Millions of Americans using drugs. How did that happen? How did we get in the shape we're in today? Fighting the drug smugglers at the border, the drug dealers on the street, and fighting for the minds of American kids and the mindset that says drugs are okay. In the popular magazines, this is what we read in the 1970s. First, about cocaine. Psychology Today, March 1977. For work that requires wakefulness or the suppression of boredom and fatigue, it can be helpful. Newsweek, May 30th, 77. It does not produce a true addiction. Science News, July 1977. Little concrete evidence to suggest cocaine is dangerous in moderate doses. What's more,
the premier textbook of psychiatry in the 1980 edition said to the effect that cocaine could be used many times a week without negative effects.
And about marijuana, McCall's Magazine, March 1972. Moderate use causes relatively little harm to mature people. U.S. News and World Report, April 72. Little proven danger of physical or psychological harm. Science Magazine, January 1973. Marijuana is not a very dangerous drug. But for the drug epidemic, we should also blame ourselves. Millions of Americans have adopted an attitude about illicit drugs, which is precisely the opposite of how we look at legal drugs. If a new chemical comes along, a new prescription medicine, let's say, for kids or pregnant women or anybody else, we ask our government to study that medicine for years, guarantee its safety before it's sold. But on the street, it's just the opposite. We'll smoke or snort or inject anything without any idea what's in it. And if someone says it's dangerous, we won't listen or we'll challenge them to prove it. Eventually they will, a decade or two later, but by then, the damage has been done. The doctor who delivered this child, in fact all doctors, swear an oath when they become an MD. A few of those words seem appropriate here. I will do no harm. If using drugs means harm to me and my family, my community, this nation, and the globe, then tonight, today, right now, you and I might say, for the sake of all, I will do no more harm.